Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Drawing and Talking with your host, Freebie Wits. That's me. So anyways, today I'll be talking about another RPR character that I myself haven't made, named Stray Dog, or I assume that's a title. I'm not sure if that's our actual name. I very much doubt it. It could have another meaning in a different mythical language, like in Gnomish it could translate to Koransa or something like that. I don't actually know is the point. Anyways, the person who created this character wanted to stay anonymous, but I can guarantee you that I do know the person behind it. Not personally, mind you, we just spoke personal message to personal message, or DMs as you kids call it these days. So what can I tell you about Stray Dog? Well, I can tell you that their profile page is stunningly brief. It's not a bad thing in and of itself, it's just something that you can see if you click on the link. It's very straightforward. Like I said, name is Stray Dog. He's got a few nicknames, he's got a few mannerisms, likes, dislikes, that sort of thing. And of course a few stats here and there. He does have a short history. He's basically an urban druid, and he's highly attuned to nature, despite living in the city. Like I said, he's pretty straightforward, it's very brief. There could be more I could find out about him by reading his roleplay posts, but I'm not really going to go into that right now, mostly because I haven't actually read them myself, which is a bit awkward. So what can I infer about this character based on what I've read? Well, I'm guessing they're a Dungeons & Dragons character, or at least lives in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, or at least inspired by it, because number one, urban druid. That's not really a term that you hear outside of D&D that often. For those of you who don't know, an urban druid is, well, a druid for the urban environment, so they control things like rats, they're very attuned to the bugs and ants, that sort of thing. The other thing that tells me that they're inspired by D&D is the fact that their deity is a character named Obanhai. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but long story short, they're a nature god in the D&D universe. I think it's the Forgotten Realms. I could be wrong. He's one of the basic nature gods, the more famous ones around at least. So another thing I should note about him is that he's a shapeshifter. I'm pretty sure that comes with the package of being a druid. Most druids, at least in D&D 3.5 and 5th edition, I believe, I haven't played druids much myself, at least for 5th edition, druids in D&D can turn into bears and the like. They can turn into animals, wolves, eagles, whatever. They're very versatile. Hence why this character is a shapeshifter, I'm guessing. The other thing I should note is that he likes to get into fights. He hates authority figures, which tells me that he could have a Napoleon complex. It's not something that's outright stated in the bio, it's just something I inferred. I could be wrong, but everything I see points towards it. Now that said, being a druid shapeshifter, he could solve that issue relatively easy by becoming something larger. However, there is a limitation to being a druid in D&D in that you can't really turn into someone taller, you can't turn into a taller version of yourself. When I say shapeshifter in this context, I'm pretty sure that they can only turn into animals. At least if we're just going by the D&D rules. This is roleplay repository, so in theory he could just turn into a larger version of himself. I don't actually know, but for the purposes of this art piece I'm doing, I'm taking that and running with it. Call it artistic license or whatever you want. So that's another thing about this drawing. He's very short, so there wouldn't be much to him. I probably could have gone into the textures and draw more patterns on the character's clothes and such, but for all intents and purposes, I went relatively simple in terms of character detail. So I intended to draw another character, this one being a guardsman, an authority figure, which he dislikes. So I'm just showing off a few character bits. The fact that he doesn't like authority figures, the fact that he's short. There's a lot of reasons why I included the taller character in this picture. And I think I quite like it. It highlights how short he is, like I said, and how much he doesn't like. I feel like I'm repeating myself. The other thing is that it shows off his magical power of being a druid. He made a vine grow out of the ground. Once again, I'm not sure if he can physically do that. I didn't find a spell list or anything like that, and I probably could have found something similar if I looked through his posts, but I didn't, so let's move on. The odd thing that I found in regards to this character is his description. If you look at the picture in the profile, he's wearing a very modern looking jacket, not something you'd find in a fantasy medieval type setting. So I was kind of confused what kind of setting he was supposed to be in at all. I mean, on one hand, modern jacket, on the other, D&D references. Now, for all I know, this character could be set in the D&D equivalent of the modern age or something like that. So think Dresden Files, I guess, except not. I don't actually know, so I just took a stab in the dark and decided to just give him his modern looking jacket and put in a guardsman wielding a primitive spear. Well, primitive by our standards at least. It's probably the height of military prowess back then. Now, admittingly, there was another image with more D&D appropriate attire, but I'm just going by what the main picture showed. So that's my talk about this character, Stray Dog, who wants to be a big dog. Oh, speaking of which, big dog, that's the other reason why I decided that he had a Napoleon complex. Is it cliche? Yes. Did I read too much into it? Probably also yes. Would I be surprised if he did have a Napoleonic complex? And the answer is no. I'm a sucker for cliches is my point. Small characters with big egos. I just like it. Anyways, moving on to the section of this video where I talk about it as a role-playing character in of itself. As a player character in a D&D style game, he's very straightforward. He's a short, gnomish druid. An urban druid. That's everything you need to know about him, I guess, as a player character. There could be more development, but that's a very good beginning. Now, what if I were to turn him into an NPC in a D&D game? Well, that's a bit more difficult, because he has no real, obviously defined role per se. Now, obviously, being an urban druid, he could be an informant of some kind, with contacts of all the animals that he can talk to, or shapeshift into, and spy. So he could be a character like that, but from what I can tell, he's got too big of an ego to do that sort of skulkery. I could be wrong, though. That said, based on his ambitious nature, I could see him being one of the gang bosses of sorts, which is a bit odd. You don't really think of druids as gang bosses, but I could totally see this character being like that. He could be a mini-boss for the players to fight and get information out of. He could be, if the players are rogues or the less savory types, I could see them being friends with this guy. So a side character, essentially, who helps the players every now and then for less savory reasons. Or he could easily be adapted to be an enemy. I don't think he'd be a BBEG. He doesn't seem like the sort to try and take over the world per se, or destroy it. He has a Napoleonic complex, but he doesn't seem like the sort with the specific vision. He's just doing it because he can, or because he wants to. So anyways, that's my drawing and talking video with Stray Dog. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff, and I hope to see you again. Bye-bye.